Good evening and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 18th take. Yes, it is race week, the 60th annual running of the Daytona 500. So excited. I'm Bear Duplessis as always, live from the Casa Cueva studios of Euless, Texas, and I'm so excited to be talking about the Daytona 500 on our 18th take this week. And I have a very special guest in the house with me today, author of the blog Philip Schmitz 88.wordpress.com. It's a name that you need to remember because if you like racing of any kind, anything with a motor at all, this guy is a dude to follow on Twitter. Read his blog, fabulous writing, knows everything there is to know about racing, and I'm so excited to have my friend Philip Schmitz on Elosa from our takes. Phil, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to be on here. Pleasure to talk about you with yeah, racing, cigars, and whatever comes between this radio gig spot. So I'm glad to be on here.
Fantastic, man. I really appreciate it. So, Philip Schmitz, 88. So, I guess that 88 means you're a Dale Jr. fan, right?
I wouldn't say a junior fan, but I think the irony of this year being your 18th show. My favorite driver throughout NASCAR was always Bobby Labonte, and the number that he'll always have with him is the 18 at Joe Gibbs Interstate Batteries, hence the hat. Hence, I don't know if anyone can see here, but pretty much this whole shelf here is pretty much all of Bobby's stuff. About 95% of that being through that 18 car and a little bit of the 43, but much of that through his career. So we'll take the 18th show. I'll take that number, to be honest.
That's really kismet. That's really cool. 18.
I didn't I didn't think of that till you said it was the 18th. I'm like,
Yeah, that's a
hey,
really great point. That's fantastic.
yeah, uh, yeah, that's my guy. I love Bobby. I loved how he raced, and he raced clean and respect. And I don't think you would find any driver in NASCAR that'll find a one bad word about him. A lot of respect with him.
Fantastic. So the for those people who don't know, I know Phil from Michael's Tobacco of Euless, where you're a patron and I happen to work part
Hmm.
time. And you are in there literally every day. You are in there more often than I am, and
Yeah,
you are part of the landscape, so to speak. And but more than that, Philip is the resident guru of pretty much everything. If you need to know something that's outside of, well, even inside the humidor, but outside the humidor as well, like, hey, who does so and so play this week? Where's this week's race at? Who's got the pole at this week's race? What channel is the game on? Phil's the
yeah,
answer
I'm
to
good
has
at that.
answered all the questions. So
Yeah,
so speak.
I
Go ahead,
Yeah,
go
you're
ahead,
pretty
go ahead.
much right with that. Yeah, I'm pretty much the guy that, hey, where's this channel at? And I'm like, it's this channel, and yeah, that's pretty much me at the shop. But yeah, I like going to the shop. I didn't go to the shop when I first smoked cigars. I started smoking cigars in '09, and I had a quite rude introduction to cigars. I think
So
my
yeah,
first
let's
cigar
hear
was
this.
not
I want to hear this. Okay, so
my
everyone
my
knows that
first cigar.
You put Nick Perdomo's kids through college because you smoke Perdomo cigars pretty much exclusively, and you put his kids through
If
college.
if I ever became big in life, I will be sponsored by Perdomo just because I smoke a Fresco every day. And it's not because it's a daily smoke. I like the smoke, and it's a good smoke to smoke while you're hanging out talking to your friends. That's how I view the smoke, and I like that. It's a few times where it gives me problems, but like I'm smoking that tonight. To be honest, it's good to smoke and talk and think, and you're not bothered with a smoke that's, I guess, more heavy, more different, and you're thinking about the smoke. It's a good conversation piece, I think, for me to talk with.
And make no
My
mistake,
first
it's not one fresco. We're talking about multiple frescoes a day.
Oh yeah, we're talking about probably twice a day. And we'll get to the other repertoire a little bit. There's others I smoke. I'll smoke a different one Sunday for sure. Uh, my first one,
Yes.
my
What is your
first,
first cigar? First cigar
it was
ever. I
this
want to hear this.
CAO Sopranos edition.
Are you
And
kidding me?
yes,
That was your
yes,
first cigar?
my
Oh
uncle
my.
was a big Sopranos fan, and I forgot what we were watching, but he was smoking one of those, and I've always wanted to try one, so I said I want to try one, and he said, "All right, I'll go get one," and I smoked three-fourths of it. It was not fun. It was like nothing I've ever tried. I never tried. Here's the thing: I never did cigarettes. I never did. That was the first thing I ever smoked. Period in my life. Um, and I was like, well, this is bad. But luckily, I found other sticks and to enjoy myself with, and because if I didn't, I probably would have met so many people. But I found, LaFleur and Drew Estates. They're on the Crown League and they're League of Nines. Have smoked a few of Cuba Cubas back in the day, and
Oh man.
uh, yeah, I went through a period. I went through a phase. Uh,
Well, I'm glad you
Joe.
stuck through it after that first experience. But
Yeah, no, that was brutal.
so
But
speaking of
yeah.
first experiences, so this Sunday, Daytona 500, obviously the 60th annual running of
Hmm.
the big race. So correct me if I'm wrong. Sitting on the pole is actually Alex Bowman, and it's his first time on the pole, correct?
I think it's no, it's his second time.
Second time, that's right.
He had a pole at Phoenix, uh, 2 years ago. A race that ended bad for him, not because it was his own fault. It was just ended bad for him for circumstances. But it's his second pole. It's his first pole at a super speedway like at Daytona. So yeah, it is that.
It is the Daytona
And
500, but he was racing for Junior, right? Speaking of Junior in '88, he was racing for Junior at the time, right? When he was covering in Phoenix.
I want to say yes. I know he's been with Hendrick for a couple of years, last couple of years. Prior to that, he was with I think Tommy Baldwin Jr. Racing. He was racing there for a little bit. He has, I want to say, 80 starts to his career,
I think I
and
saw something like that. It's a little bit over 80 starts. He covered for Junior a lot during the concussion period, and
yeah,
he had some other spots before that. Now
yeah,
so we watched. Well, you got to watch. I was working mostly last night, but we're kind of staying in tune with what was going on with the dual races and everything.
right.
And Alex raced a really conservative race. We really made notated into that. What do you think was, I mean, there's obviously some motivation behind running a conservative, clean race in there, but what did you make of some of the dual races that were going on?
Quickly for Alex, I think that was a very smart move. He has pole. He's going to start first no matter what. He has nothing to gain for this race. The worst thing could happen is he catches into a wreck, gets damaged, and he has to go to the backup car and starts dead last. There's no point in that. It'd be different if he was more of an experienced driver, I think. You saw Denny Hamlin, who had kind of the same situation. He qualified second, and he will start second, but he's experienced. He's been up front. He's been racing for over a decade, so he knows how to take care of his car and all those things. Alex, not so much. So it made sense for Alex to drop it to the back and take care of your stuff, take care of your equipment, and he'll get plenty of time to work his car out through practice, through the drafts and stuff that they have for today, and also they'll have I think two more tomorrow, then they'll be done. So I don't think Alex has nothing to worry about. But for the dual races themselves, I was quite interested. I think the four teams they've always had, I think, the advantage over super speedway plate racing over the last couple of years, and even with Chevy having a body change from the SS to the Z71 Camaro.
See, that was something you had notated. You were telling me about it when we were talking about
Yeah,
doing the show. Is you're like, I'm really interested to see how Chevy does with the body change. And they didn't,
yeah,
I mean, they didn't look bad, but they didn't look great, you know?
they didn't
Right?
really. I'll be honest. Outside of Chase Elliott, who looks to have a really good car, like I said, I think the Ford teams, Penske, Stewart Haas, Roush is Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and I would not count out Paul Menard for the Wood brothers. I think he has a good car as well. But outside of the Ford department, when I look at Chevy, when I look at Toyota, the best Chevys are obviously Chase Elliott. He looks to have a strong piece. He was able to grab the lead by himself, if I remember seeing it right. I was going back between watching the race and also talking to you or whatever. But if I remember seeing it right, I think he was second at one point, then he grabbed the lead. But he looked strong. Um, that's really about it from the Chevy department. If I had to say who's the best, second best Chevy, to be honest, is Darrell Wallace Jr., which we'll get to that in a little bit. But
Well,
for
let's
the
touch on that
Toyota,
now for a second. So, for
okay.
those people who don't know, Darrell Wallace Jr. is African American. He's black, and
Mm-hmm.
we obviously don't see very many of those of black racers in NASCAR, but
No,
he's much more than that. That's it's he's not just a pretty face, which we'll talk
no.
about pretty faces here in a second. But he's not just a pretty face. Why don't you talk a little bit about Darrell Wallace Jr.?
Darrell, yes, he has those shoes to fill for the obvious. And I'll look at him, those shoes to fill, and another former motorsport, Lewis Hamilton. He came to Formula One, and he was that same background, but the same thing that Lewis has, and maybe not to the degree that Lewis has, but Darrell is a really good driver. He's a really good racer. Um, he's young. He got his start at Roush, and he really got a really good opportunity when Roush racing isn't what it used to be 10 years ago when they had the likes of Greg Biffle, Carl Edwards, Mark Martin. Uh, they're now a two-car team. They used to be a five-car team. Now they're a two-car team. And
Yeah, they've
the
really
Bush,
gone down. They've really downsized because I
yeah,
mean
they
Roush was so
have.
much bigger, like even a
Yeah, it's
decade ago.
it's quite sad to see, but luckily last year they were able to have some success, winning a couple of races for Ricky. Darrell, last year he lost his Bush or Xfinity series. I still call it Bush series to be honest. That's how I always call it. It was he lost his ride because the Roush team folded that team down, and through circumstances, Eric Alamola messed up his back in a crash, and Darrell was asked to fill in for four races. And outside of a blemish, his first race, get used to the dash. In Xfinity, they have a regular dash, how you would drive at home. In NASCAR, in the Cup Series, the top level, they have a dash that's like how you would see like an iPad or a
Right.
computer. It's like that. And he struggled to get used to that. Once he got used to that, he got better and better and better every week. He went from being top 25 to top 20, top 15 at Daytona last year in July, and was borderline top 10 at Kentucky the next race. Then Amarola was better to get fit and get back in the car. But yeah, Darrell, he showed a lot of talent those 4 weeks of getting better and better and better every week, working with the team. And I think that's why he's with Richard Petty Motorsports right now. And we talk about that shoes that he has to fill personally. He has to drive the 43 car. And that's a big number to drive in NASCAR, as you would know.
Right.
You're driving for the king. You're driving for Richard Petty, and I think he will do a good job. He impressed me yesterday. He impressed me when he filled in last year. I think Darrell Wallace, he'll have his problems, just like any rookie, but I think he'll have a really good, solid year. I think this year.
That's fantastic. The thing that I was just to kind of touch on what we were talking about with who took the who took the dual race yesterday and everything. Someone that you're not a fan of pulled a second place finish out of the dual races yesterday, and that's Joey Logano. His car looked pretty good, and I know you're
Yeah,
not a
no,
fan
he
of his
does.
necessarily, but
I
is this the year that
I'm not a
Joey
fan of
Logano could
his.
win the Daytona 500? Is the question.
Well, he's won it once before. Do I think he can win it? Yes. What he has with him is A, he drives a Ford, and B, Penske looks strong. I mean, even with Brad Keselowski crashing his car yesterday, if his backup car is the car from the clash, his car will be strong. It'll just be the question of him starting the back and him being able to move up front and not getting caught up in someone else's mess. But of all the teams that look strong, Penske looks strong. Joey Logano he's got a quick car. Ryan Blaney has a quick car. Keselowski yesterday had a quick car, but if what he's going to have for tomorrow or Sunday is the car for the Clash, I expect him to be there. I of all the cars, of all the drivers walking into this race, if you asked me Wednesday, who was the favorite, I would have said Brad.
I was gonna say
And
you were high on Keselowski until yesterday.
yeah, he is a really good plate racer. He has a really good spotter. I don't know what happened yesterday. Either his spotter didn't tell him that Jamie McMurray was on the outside, or Brad didn't care. And I want to say it was the other. Brad didn't know he was there. Um, because that's kind of not Brad's nature, especially in a dual race. You don't force the issue like that. Um, but yeah, I think even with if he has I think I still would not count out Brad at all. He's got a really good car. If it's a Clash car or maybe any other car, I think they'll be able to work on it and continue it, and he'll be a player. He's that good of a plate racer, and if you get him in the front and him control the lead, him and his spotter would do a good job of, you know, controlling the lines and dictating the pace. So that's what he's been good at Talladega, and it should translate well Daytona.
Before we talk about some other fun stories, and I want to get your predictions for the race as well. I think that's got to be key. This is the 60th annual running of the Daytona 500, and
Mm-hmm.
unlike most sports that we watch, baseball has the World Series in October. The Super
Yep.
Bowl is in February.
Yep.
The college football playoff, Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals, they're all at the
All
end
at
of
the
the
end of the year.
season.
Yeah.
But the event that everyone looks forward to in the NASCAR world is this week. It's the Daytona 500, and it actually kicks off the season.
Yeah.
I'll ask the dumb question here. I mean I know a little bit of the answer, but I'd like to hear why you think why is it that this is the big race and it's just merely the beginning?
It's two parts. Every driver wants to win. Going every year, they want to win for their season, to make the chase, to make the playoffs for them for that year. Every driver wants to win the Daytona 500 because it does not mean your season, it means your career. If you win a Daytona 500, you go from being just a regular driver that's won to being one of what I don't know the exact number, but if I had to guess, 50 that have won this race. You go into the likes of Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon, Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, um, on and on and on of drivers that have won this legendary race. And we have it at the beginning of the year where every team brings their best car for this race. Every team that hasn't crashed out of the dual races, but every team brings their best bullet that they've polished, clean, scrutinized, built for 2 months, 3 months, maybe even more for this exact race. And because it's so big, um, if you had to pick what are the big races in NASCAR? It's the Daytona 500, the Brickyard 400, the Southern 500, and probably the Coca-Cola 600. You win those races, you've won a really big race in terms of the history of the sport. And this is what that type of race is. It's, you've gone into legendary status, and your name will always be linked with the legends that have always won this race. From now, 10 years from now, people still talk about Wayne Earnhardt, which, if I have it right, he won this race 20 years ago today.
I believe
And
that's right, actually. Yeah, I think it is today.
and
Hmm.
yeah, I like that race, but I don't like that race, to be honest. No offense. For the obvious reasons, my guy finished second, and he had the pole that year. But it's that's how big of a race this is. This race defines your career. No matter what you do else, you will always be known as a Daytona 500 winner.
It's like
and that's why this
winning
race
an
is so big.
Oscar, winning a World Series. It's like one of those things.
Yes.
It's like making the Hall of
Yeah.
Fame. It's always attached to you, no matter
Yes.
what you do. So
Yes.
the this is the 60th running, as I've said multiple
Hmm.
times now. So how many have you actually watched in your lifetime?
I want to say the first one I remember probably.
Let me take the
I
over.
think.
Is it over 25?
No, the under. I would say probably give or take 23.
Okay, and how old are you?
I mean,
29?
I'm 29, so we're
Okay.
talking what 20 years ago was 98. If I had to say, give or take, when I first watched one was probably 96. And that was when I want to say some guy named Jeff Gordon won it,
Yeah, I
whatever
remember that
whatever he
race.
is. Yeah, he had some rainbow
See, that's
car,
my guy. Yeah, Jeff Gordon was my guy. So okay. All right.
Yeah, it is and I love watching Jeff too. It's weird. Uh
It's weird the guys that we watched as kids.
yes.
The guys that we watched as kids are the old mans. They're out of the sport, or they're on the sundown of their career. Mark Martin. We saw that we
I'll
saw the
make you
end of
feel
Dale Earnhardt. What?
I'll make you feel a little bit weird about this. Remember Dave Blaney?
Yeah.
Ryan Blaney's his kid.
Ryan Blaney's his kid. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
so
it's
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 seeing that.
well, no, remember when Jeff Gordon and Dale Jr. were like the young bucks and they were like the ones that were taking the
Yes.
sport by storm and they were the
Yeah,
new
yeah,
wave
yeah. Or
and
when
now they're
I
like
remember when
retiring or out of the sport. It's just like, oh my God, like how
hell,
old are we?
heck, we saw Tony Stewart's whole career.
Right?
How weird is
Exactly.
that? We saw Tony Stewart's career. We saw pretty much all of Junior's career, all of Gordon's career. I don't remember the 93, 94 part, but much of his successful years, stuff like that. Um, yeah, it's kind of we're transitioning to that new age, and I kind of like where NASCAR is going. There's a lot of good young talent
Right.
coming in right now,
There's
but
some good
we'll
there's some
see
good
how that
drivers.
happens.
Well, speaking of
Yeah.
questionable driving and speaking of a career, one driver is calling it a career, and it was actually rumored that this was going to be her last race, but it might actually turns out it might be the Indy 500. She let the cat out of the bag on that. Let's talk a little
Yeah,
bit about
accidentally.
let's talk about a little bit about the very polarizing driver that is Danica Patrick. Okay, let's leaving open wheel out of it.
Right.
Let's just boil this down to brass tacks. As a NASCAR driver, overall, over the course of her career, is she a great, legendary, good, average, poor, or world's worst driver in NASCAR history? That's six categories. Throw it
I
out there,
would
though.
say borderline between good to average.
Okay, so you're not
And
knocking her that bad. Good.
no,
Okay,
I'm
this is
not. I'm
objective. I
not.
like
I
this. This is
mean, let's
good.
be honest here. When she jumped in NASCAR, everyone expected Tony Stewart numbers. Everyone expected her to light the world on fire. And unless someone wants to find this another stat, name me one open wheel driver that's come since Tony Stewart that has been successful. The only
Cole
one's been
Trickle.
Juan
Cole
Montoya.
Trickle. Cole Trickle's been
Oh,
successful.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He did great. He did great whenever Harry Hyde decided to help him drive a car.
Yes, exactly.
But
Right.
that was adorable. But no, you
Come on,
have
dude.
a
It's a
lot of
racing show. You got to throw in a Days of Thunder at least.
you do.
You have
I
to throw in a
mean,
Days of Thunder reference. I mean, it happens. It has to happen.
the boy don't have the balls to pass me on the outside. Uh, I was so ever. I forgot who is that actor. Well, never mind. It'll come out later. But um, you look at all the open wheel drivers that came after Tony, and I'll give you a list of drivers here. Juan Montoya, AJ Allmendinger, Sam Hornish Jr., Christian Fittipaldi for half a year, and Jack Villeneuve for half a year, if that. None of them panned out, and none of them stayed. Outside of Sam Hornish Jr., he stayed. None of them stayed longer than a year.
Well, AJ Allmendinger had kind of some like off the track
Yeah, he had
issues. Like
problems.
I think
He had
I think
problems.
he could have been an actually a good driver, but who knows? Considering what those off the field track issues were, he got banned
I
for
would agree with
substance
that.
abuses and stuff.
I
He was
would
actually
agree. I would agree. He's a good driver. No, he is, and I'm
he
not
did really good
discrediting
on
AJ at
racetracks
all.
too. So he did good on really
No,
on road
AJ
courses.
AJ is a really good driver. If he was with a better team, and if he had to go redo the Penske era when he got positive, if he had to do that now, I think he would do better. Or if he was in a better team like that, I think AJ Allmendinger would do better. But going back to Danica, Danica's had a good career. It's just, the sport is it's so, you know, just intense. There's literally, it's
It's
so tight,
hard.
so competitive.
It's
It is
really
hard.
hard. And that's the thing that people don't realize. It's like you can't just do this. You can't just get in a
No,
car and drive fast. Like it's not. It's this isn't Ricky Bobby. Like
no.
I want to go fast. This is a. It's really hard. And that's what I try to explain to people. A lot of people make fun of me because like they're like, "Gosh, Barry, you're a baseball fan. You're methodical and you have a philosophy. How can you watch guys drive around in circles?" I'm like, "Do you know how difficult it is? Like
If
it's
I'll put
insane.
it
You
like
can't
this,
even see in front of you, and you're going 200 miles an hour. You try to tell me that it doesn't take some mental acuity to actually figure out how to do that and do it
I'll tell you
insanely well
this,
week after week for
right?
miles on end."
I'll tell you this: Kimi Raikkonen, who won a championship in F1, when he left Formula One in '09, he went other ways, and he actually raced at NASCAR, did the Truck Series and the Busch Series. I think 2010, 2011, and he's told people NASCAR is not as easy as people think it is. It's yeah, you drive around an oval, but it's not what you think it is. You have to pass cars and etc. And I'm like, there's all your confirmation you need right there. That's a F1 champion saying that no, this isn't as easy as you think it is. But for Danica, when Tony Stewart came in, he had 10 cars to beat. And that gap from first to 10, let's say, was 1 second. Now, when Danica jumped in, the gap from first to 20th is 1 second. There's no margin for error here. And when Tony came in, the field wasn't as strong compared to what it is today. You have 20 really good cars that could, not only possibly win, but also get a really, really good, strong result. And it's hard to compare Danica to that era to this era. I
Because
think
I was
she's
okay, so
been
I was about to ask because I was like, are you saying that Danica and Tony are on an even playing field, but you're saying it's hard to tell because of the eras in which they
no.
raced?
Well, Tony is a better IndyCar driver than Danica was. Tony won the IndyCar championship, won more races. I'm not knocking Danica, but Tony Stewart is he's levels on. He's the AJ Foyt of his generation.
Okay.
Uh, so for people to compare Danica to Tony, that's just not fair, and it wasn't correct. That's a lot of
Oh, I didn't think
expectation for
you were. I was
someone.
just because of the line of discussion we were going on. I just
Right?
wanted to
No,
make
that's
sure I
just not
understood you.
not for me, but just other people. Other people saying why she's not winning, why she's not this, why she's not that. You know, she's she's a really really good driver. She's just it's hard for her to compete in a sport that's so competitive today than it was 15 years ago. And that level of expectation is not going to be here. But I will give Danica credit.
She
She
raced a
gave
lot
it
longer than
five
most people
years.
did. Yeah. I mean, that
She gave a damn. That's the best way I can say it. She tried. She didn't quit. She didn't get frustrated, take her ball home, and go back to IndyCar like Dario Franchitti. He did that. No, she gave it a damn. She gave it a go until you couldn't do anymore. And I'll
so
give
now
her
the
credit for that.
yeah, the Indy 500 will be her last race
Yep,
apparently. So we'll find out for sure. But the Indy 500 is looking like it's going to be her last race and everything.
most
Uh,
likely.
so to wrap before we wrap this up, Phil, we gotta get some predictions out of you. So you like Ford. Chevy didn't really impress you too much so far, but do you like Chase Elliott? You like a couple of these guys. You mentioned Paul Menard. You mentioned Joey Logano, much to your chagrin. So give me a give me some predictions here. Who's going to win this race?
I'm not going to give you a prediction of this race. I'll give you a top five. I
Okay,
think the
top
top
five. Here we
five.
go. I like this.
I think the top five will consist of uh, Joey Logano, not in any order.
Okay.
Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin.
Okay, so
I think those are your top five.
I knew you were going to say Denny Hamlin, and see that Denny Hamlin's my pick to win this year. Um,
And he has a good shot.
I think Denny Hamlin. I think Kozlowski was a really solid pick. It was until he wrecked his car. I think he
Yeah,
could still do a top five finish, top 10 easily, as easy you can, as easy as you can in NASCAR. But I think he's a top 10 for sure. He could crack the top five. I don't think the second car that he's got is going to be able to win it. I mean, that would be a hell of a story. Don't get me
it
wrong.
would be.
Um, but Denny Hamlin's my pick to win. But you got Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, Joey
I
Logano,
think
Brad Keselowski, and what was Blaney, right?
Brian.
Ryan Blaney.
Yeah, and
Round out your
I'm
top
only
five.
saying Keselowski because if his backup car is the Clash car, I think he'll be in good shape. He raced that Clash car the same time the race will be for the Daytona 500. All these guys that raced the dual race, they raced it last night. They raced it at night. The race is
Right,
not going to race at night for the Daytona.
right.
So I think that's a key factor too. So if he's going to race that car, and I don't know if he is or not, I haven't found anywhere that's has said, but if he's going to race that car, at least he has that advantage of racing that car in a race setting. So I
Okay.
wouldn't count out Brad just yet.
All right. So one bold prediction for this upcoming NASCAR season. One bold prediction. Doesn't have to
Okay.
be anything specific, just something that's going to just blow our mind. One bold prediction coming from Phil. Because for people who don't know this, Phil is usually right about this kind of stuff. Like he'll be like, hey, this kind of random fact will happen, and this random fact will happen, and this will lead to this, and this will lead to this. And it all happens exactly how he says it. And if you don't take my word for it, just come into Michael's one day and ask Joe Lipscomb for the list about the off season that happened with Formula One racing, McLaren,
Yeah.
Honda, that whole saga, because that was incredible. So yes, bold prediction for this NASCAR season. Phil, go. Floor is yours.
I could make the simple prediction of Martin Truex Jr. wins another championship, or Kyle Busch, or that some other predictions. I will go in the deep end here, or a bold position. I think Darrell Wallace Jr. wins a race this year. I think he wins a
Okay.
race this year. I think that team, Darrell is going to fight hard. They have a good alliance with RCR. And I think Darrell, just like Ryan Blaney did last year, he was always close, and then he finally got the job done. I think Darrell Wallace Jr. will win a race this year. If he doesn't win a race this year, he will become very darn close. Close. If I'm gonna make a bold, proposition choice, I'm gonna go choose one that that's not easy. Anyone can pick the championship because of the
Right,
obvious
right.
reasons. I think Darrell Wallace Jr. can win a race.
Win a
Hell,
race.
he
So
might. Hell, he might win the Daytona 500. He looked actually not too bad during the dual race, to be honest. He was outside of Chase Elliott. That was the second Chevrolet that actually impressed me. So we'll see.
all right, so Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott round up your top five prediction
Yep.
for the finish for this Daytona 500, the 60th running of the Daytona 500. Bold prediction for the upcoming NASCAR season is that Darrell Wallace Jr. will win a race. I have Denny Hamlin winning the Daytona 500 this year.
Who's your other
And
five?
what's that?
Who's your top five? Or do
Um,
you have one?
oh, okay. Well, I guess I like Chase Elliott as well. Denny Hamlin. Um, I really like Brad a lot more than yesterday. But I'll stick with him.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I agree.
Joey
I have
Logano.
money on him. I have money on Brad, so trust me, I hate saying that.
So I've got Alex Bowman finishing because he's starting on the pole, and I really like the way that he races,
I do
and
too.
Menard. So those are my top five.
Menard's going to be a sleeper in this. Menard and also Clint Boyer will be a sleeper in this. Some they haven't had the best results lately, but Boyer's always been a plate racer. And
It's like
Menard, he's
Keselowski. He
probably
has that reputation. You're right.
right. And I'll tell you, Paul Menard, he's in Brian Blaney's old stomping grounds in the 21 car, and Ryan Blaney had fantastic runs there. And Menard's now in that car, and he looked good in the door race too. So yeah,
Right.
Menard's a good choice as well. That's really I agree with that. Uh,
So some bold
we'll
some
see.
bold predictions for this upcoming race and this season. We're really excited to watch it. Phil, I hope you have a great Daytona 500 weekend, and we're really excited to see this race that's upcoming. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you coming on. Everyone
No
needs to
problem.
check out Philip Schmitz 88.wordpress.com. Some absolutely spectacular writing. I don't care if you're a racing fan or not. You need to read his stuff. He is absolutely gifted when it comes to the written word, and he understands racing and anything else with a motor for that matter better than anyone else I've ever met, including the so-called talking heads on TV. You really need to get inside this guy's head if you are a racing fan, and he does such a tremendous job. And so I really got to hand it to Phil. Thank you so much again for joining me today.
No
This
problem.
was our 18th take, and it was about Daytona 500 Racing Week. I was joined by Philip Schmitz, the fan of the number 18 car, Mr. Labonte, and we really appreciate him joining us tonight. I was live from the Casa Cueva studios of Euless, Texas. Again, ELOSOFUMARTAKES. I'm Bear Duplessis, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Bear. You have a good night.